Hello, Mr. Naoumoff.
Hello, KaJeng.
It's absolutely my honor to be sitting here today with you.
I don't think it's an honor.
It really is.
I hope it's a joy.
It's a joy as well.
And a challenge.
Well, there's a little thing here, though.
My Swiss cow.
Exactly, it's at Switzerland, and it's at Switzerland where I met you 11 years ago during the summer, right?
In Verbier.
Verbier.
And you came to study piano.
At 2008, so today...
Since then you learned.
Since then I learned, so it has been
Now
10.
you play piano and forte.
Yes. Oh, I mean...
I usually play mezzo piano.
You do?
Or mezzo pianissimo.
Okay.
So there's your connection to Switzerland
Yep.
and our meeting.
Yes, it has been 10 years.
11.
11 years even more. As in a way it sort of resembles, but not completely, your tutelage with your teacher, Mr. Nadi. But of course I left 5 years ago from IU. But,
And you took a year in between.
Yes, I studied with you for 4 years.
The point of the story is that one day you will be teaching in Verbier, some KaJeng who will show up.
I cannot imagine that happening, but
yes,
it may happen.
I will be somewhere between clouds and grounds, but I will be very happy to know that you'll probably give them the attention I gave you, I hope. Even if they challenge you.
I cannot wait to be challenged.
Oh, you will.
That's my favorite thing of all time.
You do that so well.
I do it quite well. So, may I... Because I always, when I'm in Hong Kong, I always watch your videos and those amazing lessons of Emile lessons and also your improvisation, which is over 6,000 of them, always amuses me, which I told you 5 years ago, rightfully, that I think in the planet right now, you're the pianist with the most video on YouTube.
If quantity was quality, I would have been very happy, but it's always the next the best. And another thing about teaching is that the Emile lessons are more like testaments of points of view about what I understood in my teaching so far, but they're done without student.
Yes, yes.
The student is virtually the person who's watching. When I teach you or teach my students, in real, it's a real exchange. That's the challenging exchange, which I look forward to.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead, challenge me.
No, I'm not going to challenge you today here.
You do it very well.
Not here, not here.
Over-voiced.
Well, I have something very specific to you to ask, because you mentioned quality. So, to you, what is quality in musicianship?
It's to be genuine.
Okay. To be genuine?
Yeah.
But what about...
Because every time you do something, you do it as an imitation of something. You start as a child, from the parents. All the students who studied music in the 19th, 18th, 17th centuries, they copied music of others to learn how to write their own. So in a certain way, it's not genuine, it's just learned. And then when you find your real tone, your expression, within the piece, which is there before us and after us, and all of a sudden you find the right tone that corresponds to what you understood of the world in which this piece exists, then it's genuine. Then I think it's quality.
So you're not talking about genuine in originality, you're talking about genuine in
honesty.
In understanding.
Honesty.
But does it connect to humility in a way in your...
No. Modesty is better. Humility, I think, is fake.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I thought usually people demand it the other way.
It depends on the language.
So which one you mean?
In French, bittersweet starts with
because
the sweet bitter.
From Chinese understanding of the word humility, it means an internalized humbling, but let's say understanding of one's knowledge, that one should not surpass the others. This ego should not surpass the objective.
Well, that's also because the group overrides the individual. Whenever the problem is that classical music in the 19th century concept of it was written by individuals who thought they were bigger than everything. Their egos, like, you cannot be Liszt and be humble.
Yeah.
And inevitably, when you play a Beethoven symphony on the piano, being Liszt, is that you tell the audience, I can be the whole orchestra on my own. And and he was.
But in a way,
and so that's humility to you. But perhaps what I meant by honesty was the fact that you can like the piece, understand the piece, learn the piece, write about the piece, chew the piece, teach the piece, record the piece, change mind about the piece, evolve with the piece, because through years it evolves with your understanding. And then comes a point where you find the right tone for the piece. Like if you start this and you say, "It's so deep for me, I have to take more time to express it." And then you learn that you can be calm without to be slow.
So in other words,
So you find the right tone, the right tempo, the right expression.
yeah. Speaking of growth, what I have learned the most, one word, in the last 5 years after studying with you, also with the always constant reminder from my teacher in Hong Kong, is not to be self-indulgent. Which,
well,
in a way, that is what you meant.
Yeah, is to translate the music to the audience that you like, rather than how you like the music that you translate.
Yeah.
But it is difficult because inevitably there is a level of narcissism on stage.
There isn't there.
Yeah.
Totally so.
And
right?
some watch themselves play while playing.
Because I was.
And others forget themselves in a selfless way to let the piece play.
Right.
But the problem is that the piece is not fixed in time. The piece evolves. You can do, or
So there is
with
an
the same
element.
conviction.
There is an element of personal perspective in any piece that we play, and inevitably. There's no true objectivity in music.
No, I agree. Objectivity is something that Ardalan asked about when he arrived here the first time. And he said, "I don't want an interpretation of Beethoven's sonata, I want the truth about the Beethoven sonata." As if the interpretation is the cloth, and the truth is the naked being, or the soul, if you want. And I think that to a certain extent, when you buy a doll in the toy store, you can buy the dresses for the doll. So the doll goes to school, the doll goes to vacation, so you have the different functions. But there is no way you can extract the piece you play from what appeals to you in the piece, because then this objectivity ultimately is useless. I mean, if it's just to say, "I'm going to play," without to involve myself in the pulse, in the phrasing, in the articulation, because I want to be Ortextian. And then if you do...
So that is what you mean by honesty. Which is to find the...
Is to find a way to blend your personal approach to the piece with what you think the piece is.
While being actually honest about it.
But the point is that when you listen to a piece that you played by others, most of the time you're critical. To pass too low, they didn't understand it, they didn't get it, no, it's not supposed to be like that, blah, blah, blah. Except that from time to time you hear it played by somebody and you go, "Oh, this is how I would like to hear it."
And why is that?
Because it touches a point where it's beyond the interpretation sleeve, it's the music itself.
The essence.
Yeah.
So that is what we all try to find, the quality of honesty in the understanding, comprehension of...
But there are two levels.
Okay.
On stage you try to seduce, because there are others to play for.
You project and communicate.
So you put more makeup musically, you put more rubato, you in fact subconsciously try to seduce with the piece.
It's better to than not, right? Especially in today's time, because you play for somebody.
But I don't know the time today, because you don't choose to be today.
Well,
you just happen to be today.
Yes.
And so inevitably, if your calling for the music is from yesterday, you'll sound like yesterday. I mean, nobody taught Rachmaninoff, my God, you know, by now they all write atonal. And he says, "Okay, so what? I don't care." Because he wrote still post-Chopin, when others wrote post-Schoenberg.
Oh, actually what I meant was
so what
not
I meant
about
is
composition.
no, but in the interpretation it's the same thing. You have an opportunity to say to the audience that this piece means to you certain things. The problem is that if you do it, as I said, in front of an audience, even if you try to be honest and let the music speak and be selfless, there is a level of demonstration on stage. It's self-eroticism. It happens for every actor when they have a line to deliver in a theater play by other text. They appropriate it, becomes theirs. Then you forget the rupture of disbelief that they're the actors, because art is artificial. So they act, you know they lie, but they want to trust, believe in the story so it can enter in the storytelling. And so if you can tell a storytelling that is believable, even if everybody knows that it's not yours, therefore they cannot believe you that is your personal life. It is an imaginary life that you're telling them through the piece. The point is that some people think that the piece isn't good enough, they need to be seasoned by their expression. And they say, like famous Spanish pianist told Ravel, if he didn't write it, he wrote it too austere, thanks to me, I'm saving your piece. And so I think the composers generally hate the interpretation because they think it's a betrayal. They think everything in the text is enough and it has to be played and it will appear as it is, like a craftsman.
Right.
If you follow the order of the learning how to make the craft, then the art will appear. And when you're artistic, you try to think, the music is dead on the page, I'm bringing it alive, so while I do that, I inject all what it means to me on top. So if you feel some music that goes, the expression of pain or sufferance, inevitably you connect it to what it means psychologically for you with your level of sufferance. And it doesn't have to be the same of another performer or somebody in the audience. So for you to detach yourself to find the right level of expression, I think comes either in the audience because they entice you to bring it out by being there for you to hear you play it. Right. And you go, oh my God, Mozart lost his mom. So I also lost my mom. Does it mean I think of my mom when I started? No, I think of Mozart's pain rather than mine. And so therefore, we appropriate by understanding psychologically what it meant to the composer's expression, therefore what the piece means for us to express to the audience. But then comes the recording session, where you play virtually for everybody and nobody at the same time. And the only person around, the ghost, is the composer. Did Schubert want this phrasing? Did Ravel want this tempo? Did Mozart expect this, that? Do we have to do it different in the repeat? And all these things. So in fact, it's such an involvement to play a great masterpiece, or even a smaller masterpiece, regardless of how we think of it, that we should be very light about it instead of adding on it the coating of our own expression. Oh yes, it means to me too, I also suffered, so let me add another layer of sufferance on the sufferance of the piece. And I think that's the level of honesty. And I don't think that everybody achieves it every time. I think it's somehow you aim towards it and you let it speak and you follow the storytelling of it. But I think in front of an audience, it's very difficult not to be narcissistic. And I think for some people, they say, I've never attended in person because I wasn't born, that Clara Haskell was more moving on stage than on recording. And for others, the opposite. They say Lipati was better at stage performance, but he also managed to record. You know, when he was very ill, in 1950 especially, before he died from his blood disease and the cancer in the blood, he couldn't be very strong with the treatment, so they installed him at the time a truck in his garden in Switzerland, and they showed him which button to push, and he recorded by himself.
Oh.
When he was feeling well. It could be in the middle of the night, because at that time you needed a lot of bigger crew to record anything. Today technology allows to do it as you want, but when he plays alone, can you not dissociate from the fact that he knew he was condemned? And he was very weak, and he plays something so spiritually elevating. Does it mean that we all have to be at the verge of death to play spiritually elevated? No. But that's actors to do with art. And I think that that's what I meant by honesty and quality. But quantity is another problem. You have to play as a concert pianist many times a piece. So you have to technically be so reliable that you have to take the least risks possible in terms of the performance mistakes. Because you're tired, the piano is different every time, the articulation, the heaviness, the keys. And so you learn how to play technically reliable, but perhaps without this kind of gesture that gives you the sense of, I'm going to just play the piece as it means to me, because you're being more cautious in order to go through. So probably quantity and quality don't go in well. Also, I noticed when you play a tour and you play the same concerto every evening or something like that, you constantly refer in your mind while playing to the evenings before.
Yes.
Which is irrelevant to the audience of the day or of the day after. And so, in a way, playing it once is giving all of your energy in one focused direction. Because, you know, it's one time. Regardless if it's perfect, imperfect, or what you hoped, or what comes out that is not what you hope. But you deal with the unexpected on stage. But when you start industrializing the quantity of performances, then it's less spontaneous.
Yes, it happened to me once recently. Because obviously I don't go on tour. But what happened was I was at the international competition. I played, you know, I hoped to play my best, the Beethoven third concerto. And I went over it, okay? What happened was, the result is not announced immediately. It's announced the next day. But the curse is, the one who won would have to play it again. So the next day, suddenly, the next day, suddenly I have to play as the winner.
But did you play without the same influx?
No, I played with such fear. First of all, the pressure of having just won and I have to play again without actually knowing that I have to play. Like, it was not like, oh, I expect I have to play at 8 p.m. It's going there and then, okay, or maybe I get first prize and I got first and then I have to play in 15 minutes, you know? And then the second day, I found it was so much less spontaneous. So I was so worried, what should I do here? Should I go all, okay, I wanted to go all loose because it's not a competition anymore. But I have the pressure of, I cannot screw up what I'm playing. So it was such a problem for me that night. I never experienced before. Whereas before, when I was giving small recitals in Hong Kong or wherever, first of all, this is not competition, and I just go free. The Schumann fantasy is what it is tonight. And I do think that the psychological expectation of the audiences and also your circumstance does affect your spontaneity, because it's exactly what you said, for whom and for what.
But the spontaneity is what the audience, in a way, cherishes.
Yes, absolutely.
And the reliability is what the performer cherishes.
Yes.
Because he or she is told that the competition is wide big.
But what happened?
Everybody plays clean except me.
But the thing
I've heard
is,
that from all my students.
The crazy thing was, I wanted to be spontaneous. That night, on the second night, I wanted to show that I can be loose. But I couldn't at that moment. And I'll tell you something funny. So the next day, in the morning at the airport, I ran to one of the jury, Elizabeth Zalats. And she told me, I was so disappointed in your second performance because you did exactly the same timing, same interpretation, same phrasing, everything was the same. I was so disappointed. And she's right.
Her grandfather or mother taught Mr. Bashkirov.
Oh, yes, yes.
And I was years ago in a jury in Santander.
Yes, I remember.
And they were exchanging in Russian among
Can we not talk about this, please?
Well, I find very interesting that she mentioned that to you, that she found that you were too predictable.
But it was true on the second night.
When they exchanged in the competition, was exactly about the opposite.
Okay. Now I've told the third funny thing.
Because I think that it's very important when you meet people who are the elders in your profession, in this case her at the airport that day, that you get the right impression of what they expect. Because ultimately you only can deliver as a person who you are, as an artist who you are, what you are.
Yeah.
And when you hear people tell you like that, in a way it freezes you a little bit, because you think, oh, I have to be always different, I have to surprise, I have to be...
It wasn't the same at the competition. But I tell you the third funny thing was because this is very important. It's about human perception. So it was broadcasted online, and everyone online, including some really famous whoever, told me, oh, your second night is so much better. It's so much more spontaneous, which I knew was total BS, because it was simply not true.
Well, I think
people expected that it was better.
I think when you play a piece that is famous,
yes,
you will never satisfy anybody.
Yeah.
Some will think that your rubato is not enough, some will be too much.
Oh.
if you were playing a concerto by an unknown composer, let's say Naoumoff concerto.
Or even the Shostakovich Prelude Fugue at Bach, nobody knew that.
Oh, yes, they do.
No, then most of them told me they did not know the piece.
Again, don't listen to what the elders tell you. All I can tell you is that the storytelling, the believability, the connection to your musical narration is more obvious when the audience of knowledgeable people, who are the jurors, listens to you with the same level of storytelling expectation as a child being told a good night story. But as soon as you play for them a piece that they played, there's no way that you can convince them that you're enough, too much, not enough, spontaneous, knowledgeable, anything.
So maybe what you said about honesty is the only common ground. If the person, the experienced listener, somehow see another person's interpretation, it's somewhat in the honest ground of perspectives of that piece, then it's at least, first of all, not offensive, hopefully, and second of all, commonly.
I think the insecurity of most elders in your profession makes them unable to accept
yes,
a valuable interpretation that is not like theirs. Therefore, by pedantic, by age ways, they would say it's not supposed to be that way.
Right.
Most likely because they were taught that when they were students too. And so it takes a lot of openness of mind on the point of view of the established elders in the profession, to accept a young person play in a way that you didn't and won't do. Even if you might, because you're not secure in yourself, feel like, oh, why didn't I think about it myself before him? And that happens at subconscious levels that they don't tell you. They only tell you play too fast, you play too slow.
It's human, isn't it?
But I think that if you play a piece that is very less known, okay, perhaps not totally unknown, what happens? They listen to it with the same level as the listener who just wants to enjoy you play the piano without to be a knowledgeable person. And so if we get piano competitions where the jury is the audience only, and the audience is made mostly of, at best, music lovers, but not musical professionals, then you would have probably a real slice of reality, sociologically, if you connect with the audience or not. Because the professionals tend to not like ways that artistic personalities appear on stage if they have very much of their personal involvement.
But that is also dangerous, because if let's say if it's a jury from the audience only, the danger then it would become, usually I can imagine at a competition, is that the one who is the most appeasing on stage, the most enticing and showy and impressive, would get the majority.
But isn't that the concert hall?
Well, yeah. But
so that's what it is. The rest is. You try to go to a competition to prove that you have the charisma and the technique, but not too much, in order not to over-involve yourself so that you can have the lowest level of majority conviction by the professionals who might not like this, but might like this. In other words, when you lower the denominator, then you play very neutral. When you play very involved, then you will be probably disliked by those who think that you take too much personal choices in the interpretation, regardless if it's your teacher, yourself, or something. And so the ultimate point of the competition is for you to play concerts through the competition's fame. And in the concerts, you have to play with involvement, because the audience who doesn't know the piece needs to see that you're involved in the piece. They don't have enough the knowledge to know the exact stylistic difference between playing Haydn and J.C. Bach. If you tell somebody what's the difference between rap and hip-hop, they look at you like you're an idiot not to know. But if they hear you play Haydn and Ravel the same way, and they don't know about classical style, then they wouldn't know the difference, and they'll say, oh, it's good, man. But if they're professionals, forget it. You can never convince them. So in a way, you have to erase your personality to satisfy a jury, like the filter of the jury, and then you have to re-inject your personality over the piece when you perform. In a way, you're both times not honest. Because I think the very competition is with the result. Whenever the concert is a jury without result, those who don't like you don't throw you tomatoes on your face, don't eliminate you, they just go home and they say I didn't like him. And those who liked you say I liked him, but there is no... That's why I think in a way the ideal situation is to be able to transform what the piece means to you through you selflessly to the audience. And if you feel like, of course it's a competition, you have to try to play clean because you know that everybody plays cleaner than you, basically. That's they all think of it. And the teacher, as I am, always says, stop the dictatorship of the wrong note. Just play the phrase as it comes to you and then be spontaneous. But to reach that level of spontaneity, you have to have a degree of touch control that allows you not to fear. So the fingering matters, the substitution matters, the legato matters, the phrasing matters, the expression matters, the meaning of the details matter. And then at the same time, once it's absorbed, you can just deliver it as you just speak naturally. That's why they say of great actors, they act as if they are themselves, but in fact it's filtered by artifice. And I'm sure that when you perform, you think about every gesture to be controlled so that you don't play a wrong note.
Yeah, that's in the practicing as well, of course.
But when you perform, do you think? After the practicing?
It depends on the reliability, right?
Oh, the piece.
Of how well you practice.
No, but I mean, once you've practiced.
Then
because obviously when you play, you don't practice.
Yes, of course.
So do you think about it?
No, unless it's like a... But I've learned also recently, because I've been performing more, is that the lesser you think, the more reliable it is. Usually if you think about a mid-memory slip or fingering, then that's the place it becomes true conscious. Well, that's now we're entering the psychological balance.
But there is a technical fact of some gestures which were considered until the 50s even, like Corto's playing, extremely meaningful choreographically.
Yeah.
And regardless of their reliability. Okay, so what happens is that today everybody plays clean, because I think in part we have been a little bit subjected to easy digital editing, which allows people with less technique to sound clean, even if perhaps empty, of musical content. And those who hear musical content, if they're not clean, then they're immediately rejected. I've never heard a jury member tell me, oh, it was very interesting, but not clean, but I think we should hear the next round to see what they'll do musically. It's always the opposite. Is that it's clean, so I have nothing I can say against. And if you say, yes, but it's empty of music, yes, but it was clean. So in a way, the competitions privilege that kind of attention to that technique. And look at what happened. Lipati didn't win a competition in Austria. And Cortot, who was in the jury, gave him a scholarship for the École Normale. So in a way, by not winning, he earned lessons with Cortot, who brought him as a student by choice. Something more or less similar happened years ago when Pogorelic didn't win the Chopin competition, and Martha Argerich stepped up for him by moving out of the jury and saying this is not right. And he was given an opportunity to do a Deutsche Grammophon recording, which came out at the same time as the winner, who did it by contract of the competition. So there are situations where you can be singled out by a member in the jury who can say, okay, I step out for that. But most of the time it doesn't work. So that's why I think you should try to continuously search for the inner meaning of the piece. That is what you understood after you heard your teachers, after you heard the recordings, after you absorbed the knowledge so far in your life. And sometimes other things in your life will bring you to play differently or better, but later. Like I always thought when I was a student, why keep told play simple?
You were being told.
And nobody tells me what it means or how to reach it. Because simple has such such dubious effect as a word. It's not dumb and it's not complicated, but subtle can be simple too. And most of the music we play has complex inner voicings or pulses or harmonizations. In other words, simple is a way to say play directly the direction of the line. And that they don't tell you always about. They tell you play simple. But the direction of the line is a lot. Because the melodic line on the piano is not felt like when you play string instrument or you sing or you feel it in your body. It's intuitive. And so it becomes secondary. So if you think, you reach the 10th. Oh, so beautiful. And then the dominant. And then the tonic. Then the subdominant. So now we've visited all the family and the uncles, and we're going to stand on the dominant. So by the time you did, and when they tell you play simple, they want you to go, and all that has to be inside. But when it's displayed, by the time you don't play it so quickly melodically with the harmonizations and the repeated notes in the tenor and the ostinato in the bass, it becomes heavy because this and that and this and this and that and everything. That's why I find it very deceiving when you're told play simple. And even if they tell you where is the melodic line's direction, arrival point, you have to still be able to play the details around. You cannot just say, okay, I'm going to just fly over to the arrival point and make it the whole movement in 3 seconds. Because I know exactly which are the arrival points, like the sentences, you know.
Yes, but the sentence to play simple still stand, which is the ambiguous point.
I find it more easy for the listener to consider it simple, or the conductor who says to the gentleman, just do this, or do that. And when you play, you have to play all the details. And while you play all the details and you make sure they're not repeats and it's not too loud and this and that, and you try to carve every detail of the complex texture that the composers usually write, then all of a sudden you forget the simplicity of the line.
So, well, especially with your mind, because you compositional-wise and pianistically-wise, you see every details of the composition. So for you, how do you aim to achieve that simplicity?
By hearing the inner voices in real time, layered, rather than by beats chordal. Like instead of hearing...
And then how does it contribute to simplicity? I know.
Because I hear them in motion, and not by slices.
So for you, that contributes to being simple?
Well, because I think simple means go to the aim of the phrase. No matter how many complex things and beautiful decorations. Yeah. And so if I hear it in motion, I'm always there. If I hear it by slices, it's like you take 70 pictures or one video. So inevitably the video is motion, and the pictures are motionless beats.
So it's a natural flow horizontal?
Yes, of multi-layered.
And that brings us to simplicity?
No, it brings me to the... It doesn't distract me from arriving to the point.
You're not distracted by it.
And because of that, then at a slower, medium or very slow tempo, you still appear to be going where you want to speak. You don't just stop and start.
That is the musical understanding and execution. Then what about simplicity in emotional expression?
I think of that very much in the fourth movement of the Franck Sonata.
Oh yeah? How so?
Because you've gone through everything in the first 3 movements in terms of human expression, since it was written for Isaïe's wedding by Franck. You have the meeting, the consumption of love, then separate beds, and then the last movement, the woman follows the man 2 steps behind. That's how the 19th century point of view of the storytelling of the piece was. But regardless, even if it's not in canon, it's written purposely with step motions, so it sounds like a song. Whenever you can hardly sing, notes and chromaticisms, and here it's non-repeated notes and no chromaticism. It sounds mostly like an anthem, or kind of chorale.
So what about the simplicity and emotion?
Well, that's exactly the point. How to find to not overwhelm the expression of the simplicity of the piece by your involvement in it.
How?
Is by letting a little bit the music speak without you involving in it.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I like that very much.
But isn't that different for every instrument?
Sorry.
Isn't it different for every instrument?
I don't think so. I think it's the same principle in music. The music expressions, in a way, shows you, and you just follow it, and you that's how you, in a way, emotionally.
I think operatically the melodic line always prevails.
Yeah.
But most of the music written for piano or chamber music is written by symphonists, quartetists, organists, but not single voice instrument musicians. There is no piano quintet by Isaïe. There is no piano and violin sonata by even Paganini.
Oh.
At the level of which you have it by a Brahms, by a Schumann, by all these composers. So what happened when I recorded the Brahms sonatas? The violinist Patrice Fontanarosa told me rightfully, "Oh my God, this is a simple song." And we should not play too slow. And the piano part is full of chromaticisms under that. And I told him, it's true, the melody is simple, but the piano component written by Brahms is very complex. So if it was with a simple Alberti, it would be really simple. But when you have, in a way, the accompaniment has its own interesting line that distracts you from the simple beauty of the Ländler song. So you wonder if the composers themselves didn't think simple. Even if they wrote very, let's say, direct music like this. For me, this is a personification of simple.
Oh. Oh, okay. Now I know what you mean by the Brahms.
The problem is the treatment of the melodic line. If you hear any Bellini aria, it's always, and all the attention is in the melody.
So to simplify what you're saying, I think what you meant is that we should aim for simplicity, yes, but we should not oversimplify the context of the music anyway.
So the only way I answered Patrice Fontanarosa is yes, I can do it.
But?
And I did it, which was to play on the surface, to play very light, and to play very flowing.
With attention to the details,
because
right?
it takes time to express the melodic.
Of course.
Yes. So instead of doing the ladies and gentlemen, listen to how beautiful my accompaniment design is.
And then you played.
I had to play and erase myself in terms of to bring all the attention to the simplicity of the line.
So in a way you play in the method of.
But with his writing, with Brahms's writing.
And was it too simple for you? Not enough for you?
No. I think the problem is that the writing of the texture under the melody is written by composers who are polyphonists.
Yes. Mm.
So if the melody is beautiful and simple on the violin, in the expression of the melodicity of it, the problem is how you organize it with the accompaniment.
Yes.
And so the accompaniment can, in a way, sink it by its complexity, or you can let it afloat if it's very simple. And what I remember is that when you want to play beautiful, simple, but not deep and heavy and complex and all that. You try to play flowing without asperities, no accents. So if you can play faster, softer, and have no accent, then it doesn't appear fast. But if you play fast and it's uneven, or you want to do expression with a hairpin, immediately it's adding makeup to it. And so if you can play without makeup, then you're the craftsman. If Brahms wrote this design, I don't need to add to it my own expression, because then the expression is the melody.
I think I may have a different, in my opinion, a better word for the word simplicity, which is distilled.
So distilled is take out stuff from the water to make it pure.
In a way, there are a lot of information, pulse, the dynamics, harmony, polyphony, everything. But the emotional simplicity is come from the distilled of all these elements into the essence of each. And perhaps because while you're playing simple in that accompaniment, it's still within those expressive suggestions from the
In a way, you relate to the piece.
Yes,
if the piece is beautiful, I don't have to overstate it.
If we use the word simple too much, we actually oversimplify. But if we mean distilled, it's still from the same source.
I think philosophically, when the teachers used to speak about simple, I think they thought of the village idiot. The village,
did they use?
Yeah, I think so.
Like being dumb, not seeing the
something
elegance?
Like Rousseau's view
Really?
of the Emile by Rousseau when he describes the nature being gentle and human making it bad. And so, for instance, the simplicity is there, is that nature is, in a way, very complex. It's a big clock system with a watchmaker that some people believe in or not. But the view of a sunset satisfies your emotion. You don't have to calculate the astronomical facts that bring you to that sunset, but they are. But so it's like saying, I love a Bach fugue because of the complex mathematic organization of it, or I just love it for the expression of it. And so it comes down to the point that simplicity comes to the village idiot. What is the village idiot? Is the person who is supposed to be mentally challenged, but because of that is closer to God, because he or she sees the things as they are.
Yeah.
And so in a way,
that's what you mean. You don't mean that they're intelligently dumb. You mean that
they are in a way, but they're not polished by a certain amount of knowledge and attitudes where everybody in society, to satisfy each other, lies to each other. But it's a polite lie. And when you're a village idiot, you don't lie, just say things as they are. And so in a way, the music is simple because it's as it is. It doesn't need me. It doesn't need you. It doesn't need anybody to exist by itself. But at some point, you bring it to life from the paper. And inevitably you say in your playing, through your playing, by your expression, regardless if you stifle it or you enhance it, you're for spontaneous or withheld, you say, this is what it means to me. Because inevitably it's you who plays it. It's not Brahms who plays it in this case, or Rachmaninoff plays Rachmaninoff. They did it by themselves, well or bad, but they're dead. It's the essence of their music that remains. And the only reason you play a piece, most of the time, unless it's an obligation, is because it means to you. And all of a sudden you say, and it has meant so many things to so many people to play this opening. It defines a way to being artistically a pianist of Romantic era. But not everybody agrees of how much to delay what. So the rubato, the non-rubato. That's why I think simple is more like try to go down to the piece itself. And you're right when you said you don't have to play anything, just let it happen. the distilled way.
Because they still also come from intelligence, you know what I mean, right? It comes from a process of
Yeah.
processing, actually.
And this processing in water, distilled water, is making it purer by taking out some things out of it so that it can be easily used for...
I meant taking out the...
It's a filtered way.
Yeah, taking out these things, not the subject matter, but the unnecessary emotions, the imposition, actually.
Well, I think the problem is that after Rachmaninoff, roughly said, nobody composes their pieces. So nobody questioned Rachmaninoff when he played his in concert, as concert pianist as he was famous for instance, playing his variations on La Folia. Nobody knows his piece, so he plays it. He even mentions that when the audience didn't catch enough attention, he would cut off some variations. But since people didn't know the piece, compared to the rest of the program where he played Beethoven, Schumann and everything. So that is what I meant. Where is the Lang Lang Sonata? Where is the KaJeng Quartet? KaJeng plays a Brahms quartet, and Lang Lang plays a Beethoven sonata. And inevitably you tainted by who you are. And in a way you should. And if people want to hear you, it's also because they want to hear the piece by you. If not, they'll just silently open the score, smile at it and close it, and not need anybody. It's like when you read a book, you don't need somebody to read it to you unless you don't know how to read. So inevitably you have a personal connection to the book because you can read it by yourself, misunderstand or more or less understand. But here you are the reader to the audience. Unfortunately, in the jury, the audience is already there to say that they don't agree because they're supposed to know, and you're not. And you have to satisfy them. But beyond that, the regular audience is there to be told the story. And I still think that's exactly where it lies to, is that everybody plays their own piece. Nobody asked Mozart to play a Bach piece when he went to a castle. Nobody asked Chopin, could you play a Handel piece, please? They assumed he'll play Chopin, regardless if it's written or improvised, but he plays Chopin. And so when you go play somewhere in a competition, you should say, I'm going to play for you a whole program of KaJeng's music. Like Prokofiev when he won his school concerto competition with his own concerto. So I find that interpretation at that point becomes an inevitable situation when you play somebody else's words and you have to sound like they're yours. To be or not to be. So many ways you can say it. Who knows how Shakespeare said it? Perhaps he said to be, not to be. So inevitably you add emphasis to the meaning of it. And if you don't, then why are you doing it? It has to mean to you. So I don't think simplicity has to be cut off from involvement, from drive, from this honest, deep meaning to say, this is what it means to me and I play it for you. Not, I'm just trying to be not offensive, scholarly correct, you're Textian, and I'm going to try to please everybody by not involving myself too much, regardless if I could or I don't want. And that's a problem, because then you have a forest tree of pianists who play to please. My teacher, Mademoiselle Boulanger, used to say something very true, which I didn't believe at the time. She said, the very musical musicians play very non-musical. And I was like, what does it mean?
What does it mean?
I thought when you're a musical musician by intuition, by birth, by emotion, by education also, you cannot not play musical.
Yeah, what does it mean?
Well, for her, a lot of the music making, regardless if it's interpretation, composition, whichever factor of music making, was to do with the hearing.
And she's saying that they don't hear.
They hear the piece so well in their inner ear that they don't hear, that they don't project it.
Oh.
And she finds very often that musicians who are not intuitively strong musicians, who don't have a drive, who don't have a gift really, who do it to please, they manage to be very convincing because it doesn't mean to them much. So they do exactly as told, and they're believable because they do it exactly in the right levels. that they're taught to do. But those who have their inner influx, no matter what you tell them, they do it their way.
That's exactly what Mr. Cohen told me yesterday. He told me that my temperament oversees my hearing.
This is what people probably told Busoni. You know, Ferruccio, I think that's a bit exaggerated what you did with this solo violin piece. I think you should just stifle yourself and just do simple, you know. So obviously the charisma
Yes.
is in a way disproportionate with the honesty of the pieces we spoke earlier. But I think that when you reach a point where your honesty matches your character, people either reject you, either accept you. Of course, the problem is that mostly reject. And so most people say, oh, okay, I obviously don't fit, right? I'm too much for these, not enough for those. I'm too much this and not enough of that. It's a machine, the grinding machine of competition is to put people out of the road, is to say, discourage you, get out, leave it for the few who are supposed to be legitimately on the road. The others don't belong there, get out of the road. And then when you hear Glenn Gould, Lipati and others, you go, wow, what a character, personality, what a style. And then you have reviews in the magazines where they say, what an incredible interpretation in the 30s of this piece. But if you play with that waste today, they would say, this is ridiculous, we're no more in this time period, we cannot do that. So I think what we admire in some is what we reproach to the others.
Yeah.
And so if you're told you have too much, I can tell you that Cocteau, not Cocteau, Cocteau said, make of all what you are criticized, your strength.
Oh, yeah?
So they tell you you're too much, then you say, okay, I am too much.
Oh.
I know.
In there, he's a painter.
He was everything. He was the one who organized also the group of Les Six.
Yeah, oh, I see. Yes.
He was a writer and everything. But my point is that if they reproach you to be this or that, like they did for the Impressionist painters. In French, the word Impressionist means amateur. And so the reviewer in the Figaro wrote, for this bunch of painters, they're a bunch of amateurs. They're fakers, basically. That's what he wanted to say. And they decided to use this as their signature name. Okay, we are the Impressionists. And I think today is disbelievable by the audiences who watches their paintings that they were so marginalized compared to the painting of the time that was the academic painting, which was basically photography on paint, and they painted only their feelings or their moods into the paint. That was before even Cubism and all. I just speak about the beginning of getting out of figuralism. But the point is that if you're told something and you're constantly told the same, you can accept it and say, okay, that's what I am. Which means that you cannot fit in certain funnels of competitions. And if your musicianship develops through the 10, perhaps 40 years to come, repertoire, personality, curiosity, organization, chamber music, all the things that you do in your life, between teach, organize, play, record, conduct, bring audiences, build new ways of thinking of music, technology, everything you want. If it's driven by your genuine, what I called honesty earlier, inevitably, at some point, the times of the competitions, of the growth, of the studies go away, and people only say, oh, what a great tradition.
What a what?
What a great tradition when you will play age 80.
Oh.
But I still think that most of the people who were young were so criticized that when they become themselves critical because they're asked to by judges in competitions, then in turn they exercise the same way. So the student is in a way the young artist, and in a way already the old artist in the young.
I would like to save what we're heading towards about the next so-called next generations or younger generations of pianists to the next round of discussion. So, but I want to tell you something interesting is I was looking at you speaking, and almost all of what you were saying, it reminded me of what you told me years ago, in the consistency and the coherence.
So I don't evolve.
No, you evolve, and I evolve, but what is really evolved is my understanding of your words also now evolved.
I see.
And also, no, wait. But also interesting is I was just suddenly had a shock moment. It was, oh my goodness, I'm looking at Mr. Naoumoff speaking again. I'm here, and we're speaking again. It gave me a lot of joy. But I would like to stop here for the video because we are at the hour mark before we continue at the next one first. So I want to thank you again.
I would like to thank you again.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure.
Because it's a very important sentence you just used.
Okay.
That I repeat myself, and you understand me better now.
Of course, definitely.
So in fact, it's a question of the quality of the receptor, not only the quality of the projector.
And also, you know, when I'm in Hong Kong, I actually constantly speak to you. Like my mind is going, and sometimes I go, goodness, I think like Mr. Naoumoff.
I even speak to my dead teacher.
Yes, that's what you told me as well. You just speak to her, right?
But the point is that what I think happens is that the language of the transmission of the thoughts, of course the emotions don't need words. It's the grammar of music that needs the grammar of the language. And the better you possess the language's subtleties and richness of vocabulary, the better you transmit. So English is not my native language, far from there. It's closer to yours.
Is it? I don't know.
Well, you've grown up speaking English.
Well, halfway.
But not fully.
Yes.
I didn't.
Oh.
And so we met around music, because you came in Switzerland one morning, and because you came 4 years here after that, and now you everywhere else, and you still think of what I was saying from time to time. Perhaps I also think like that of my teacher, saying, oh, that's what she meant. And I think it takes time to absorb the concepts by one's own growth of what we're taught. And I still think the language matters a lot. In the case of my teacher, she spoke to me in French, which was not my native language either. And I think that if we can speak music language, of course people usually think music is international language. That is true for the emotion, but not always for the explanation. Try to explain with emotion a fugue. It's not possible. You have to put words to it. And we just try to define simple, but we could define what is a subject compared to a theme. And all these things are subtle things. And I wonder, when you work with your teacher in Hong Kong, and you speak with them in
Cantonese?
In, let's say, a native language to you, do you find that to be a more direct connection to the meanings of the musical suggestions? Do you have to filter it like me and figure it out 8 years later? It's like, that's what he meant when he was silly saying it.
Well, okay, the simple answer is, there is a certain channel of communication that only exists between you and I. With others, it's different.
It's to do with
it's nothing to do with language.
Self-challenged humor?
No, well, it's the chemistry and also the understanding, which is beyond the language anyway.
But the reason for which I mentioned for the language is because the only way we transmit our knowledge, besides the examples, is the speaking.
Yeah.
So if I could speak with every student in their native language, perhaps I can reach more deeper in their subconscious about what it means to be simple, to be expressive, to be honest.
I wanted to tell you earlier, before the video is what my interpretation of your teaching is distilled into one word or two words. Freeing perspectives. Is to free up perspectives.
Enlarge horizons.
Or originally I used the word open, but I think freeing up perspectives is a better word. And in a way, it is a two-way sword, because I do think in a way I have too much self-perspectives of things, of everything, which makes it very interesting and in a way repelling for others to teach me at times.
You tickle the DNA of the composer, so you feel like you're teasing the composer, and other people say, "How do you dare?"
No, I mean, not only about to the composers, it's about to what people say to me. Like when anyone, a student or a teacher or a jury, they tell me something, I have 10 ways to see it, literally. And I think it's because of the exchange that we have had for 4 years.
But you see, it's because you came to my academy in France, you were here, we met at different places, and every time we exchanged at very honest, deep levels.
Yes.
Even if sometimes provocative and challenging.
Mm.
And I find that when I confront former students of my teacher with me, and we realize that we have, while received a very big knowledge and depth of her scholarship, we don't really have the same perspective of what she meant.
Exactly.
And it's some people miss it, some people misunderstand it, and others reject it even.
Exactly.
The point of the story is that it takes two, the person who will give and the person who will receive, and make their own of it.
So I always observe something that happens after I study reviews. Anyone who teaches me or tell me something, at first they're very shocked at my perspective of things, and then afterwards it depends on them to whether they can embrace it. Some cannot. Then I hide myself.
My conclusion for that would be, a true disciple for me is not somebody who would accept what I do.
Right.
But somebody who would use the filter of what I suggest to become more themselves.
Yeah.
And I find that I have almost none except one, and it's not you, student who plays under the second escapement. And it's so beautifully legato. And it's so risk-free. When most students of mine, when I suggest, say, what if the piano doesn't speak? What if the keyboard is not even? What if I'm not in the same mood, situation? It's a physical thing. It's so subtle. So I consider her as my disciple because she plays exactly the way I would like to hear it if I could play it like that. And sometimes better even, which is the point of teaching, is that student becomes better than you. In your case, you're so rambunctious, so self-evidently full of your own, also very provocative ideas, but always gentle, even if sometimes self-serving and unnerving. But I think that you know that about yourself. And I think that ultimately that doesn't matter, because what matters is how you play. And I find that when I hear you play, especially lately, I find that you have grown a lot into more of what you wanted to do.
Really?
You do it more now. And less worried about if you should or not. You're more radical now.
Am I?
And I think that in that sense, whatever you do can be more disliked or more liked.
Yeah.
And I think that my teacher had a lot of students, but I don't think that just studying with my teacher made them who they were, because they were already searching for something. And I think that the true disciple is the person who absorbs the teacher's musical universe, if you want, not just a skill of how to play this and how not to play that, but partly the whole universe of understanding the pieces of music, or the way to approach the keyboard and the sense of colors and atmospheres and all that. Everybody talks about the same things in a different way, but when you study a long time, and she studied with me 9 years, inevitably you get very close to the understanding of the essence. But in your case, you came very young to me by your choice, and I'm very thankful you did, but also very rambunctious and very difficult to shape, because you didn't want me to shape your playing. And so I did a little bit of pointillistic ways, like the Seurat, the painter. I did dots here and there, and I let you develop them, but I knew that besides, after you left, you had to filter it on your own, besides your other teachers, of course, because nobody is built by one single shape or form of education. It's a combination of information, of emotion that comes from different ways. And ultimately, if you play the way you are, it's not because of who taught you, but filtered is who you really are. And every time you play, regardless if you're convinced by it now, if your recording is better next time, if your performance will be more convincing in 10 years or in 6 months, that's human, natural. At least while you do it, you respond by saying, this is who I am in the piece. Mm. And if you were told by Mr. Cohen that your, what is it?
My temperament oversees my hearing of the actual product.
Yeah, so we go back to the point of humility, simplicity, and truth.
No, he meant the actual execution.
Well, I mean, isn't it part of it?
Yeah,
so how do you then consider you have to take it off? How do you take off the coat of that to just leave the piece?
I don't think he meant to take off the temperament. He meant to actually listen to myself more. And I was shocked because it's exactly right. And it's exactly something I've been thinking for a long time.
But don't you think that the temperament is the result of what the playing of yours calls for you?
Yes, but he did not mention anything about diminishing that. It's more about actually hearing the product. His simple words is the product of the music is a sound, and he's right.
But I think that when students ask me how to play in a different hall, from the practice room, in a hall, resonant, less resonant, very resonant. Oh, I'll play less pedal, I'll do more pedal, I'll change the tempo. I don't believe it works. I think when you study the piece, you organize yourself that the mnemotechnic knowledge of the piece takes it all. And you cannot change just the pedaling in this hall, just the tempo in that hall. In other words, if you are told that your drive is too much over the music that you don't hear, at some point you have to do what I said earlier, which is you have to let the music speak beyond yourself.
Yeah.
And so you cannot totally erase yourself.
No, but at the same time, I think what he meant is, while doing that, pay attention to what I'm actually playing out more. And I agree.
But do you find that Pogorelic does that? Do you find that...
I think the greatest artists have a balance of intent and consequence.
Busoni?
I don't know. Maybe it's what they intended.
When Chrysler has the Pugnani Chrysler, does he think of that? Does Rachmaninoff think that when he does the variations on La Folia? I think they are involving their ego over the piece.
Yeah,
that's what happened with the Mussorgsky pictures. Actually, in my case, for the concerto.
I was specific about what he's. I don't think he was meaning the intent. I think he's just focusing on the actual product of music, as if let's say, as if I recorded myself and listening to it again. Like the temperament and the intent is still there. I personally
found the jig.
The what?
Of your performance.
Oh, the
yes. Absolutely flamboyant, extravagant, super vivifying.
Super what?
Vivifying, like
vivid. It's like electrifying.
It's like you breathe more ether through your nose and you have more air in your lungs and you go like, oh, I am uplifted. And I never thought for a second, stylistic, instrumental, tempo, phrasing. I found that you were so driven that you wanted to show that for you the jig is this uninterrupted gesture that reaches that, and you played it with that uncompromised, unadulterated excitement. And if somebody tells you after that, you should stifle this, you should take out, normalize, do this, then what will happen? Either you won't be genuine to yourself, not that you cannot evolve, but you cannot evolve and change it within a month or a week. It's going to be through a lifetime when you can say, in 10 years from now, I shouldn't have done this, I should do less of that now. But it's a long course of things. Like when Karajan recorded the 9 symphonies every 10 years, every time he had some subtle changes of opinion about his own tempi. or Glenn Gould recording pieces of Bach through his life. So you cannot change now, but I still think that you should not lose or take away what drives you to play like you did. Because then, objectively, what will be the next time you'll play this jig? You'll think, oh, I shouldn't do too much. So you'll hold back. Will you?
That's exactly what I have been doing in the last weeks after the comments.
So you went to a competition.
And it toned me down.
To be filtered, and in a way to be castrated partially in your musical drive because you're told you're too much.
Exactly.
So why do you go to a place where the lock is smaller than your key? You shape your own lock and put your own key in it. If you only play in your own festival, then you'll play like you like.
But I cannot only play in my festival.
Well, that's the whole point. In order to have a career as a concert pianist, you want to win a competition through which you have to funnel your musicianship in order to re-establish it after. Because if you don't play with your drive in a concert, people who don't know the piece will find it not compelling. So the question then of the truth comes objectively in your point of view again. They don't read the book, they listen to the reader. And in this case, they don't know how to read the music. They listen to you dictate it to them by your playing. And some people sometimes don't like a piece, and they start loving it because they heard it one day by somebody. They don't know if they like the piece besides this person. And perhaps they don't. Perhaps you personalize the piece in a way that they like it. So I think that beyond the competitions, you have a career as a musician. So you have to have the honesty of the phrasing, the honesty of the style, the transmission of the knowledge, and you have to be a good musician, honest in the sense of connecting to the meaning of the piece as a performer or a teacher. But at some points when you play, you should just play with your spontaneity. If not, what's going to happen? What's the point to go to places where people tell you you're too much for our door, so cut your head and you'll pass under. Then you have no head.
I agree. I think it's a very fine... It's a very dangerous zone to go to the competitions. One has to be very clear of what it is and what he's going through.
I had a very, very, very humble colleague in the jury the other day who happened to have won the competition years before you. And he told me something very, very beautiful. He told me, had I, perhaps today I wouldn't have won it.
Of course.
But that takes a lot from somebody who's an established musician to say that. I think the level of playing is very high today. Mm. Perhaps not the level of involvement.
But the level of playing?
Yeah.
What do you say about the musical people don't play musical?
And so perhaps he meant to say that the way he played was good enough to win then, but perhaps then if all of you were there then he might have not. And I think this is the case of our projection, of our musicianship. When we are called to be on the jury and we are older, inevitably we hear how people play the pieces that we thought we knew how to be played. And we realize that even if we don't agree with the choices, we realize that the levels are very high. And so the problem is that when the technical levels are high, the personal involvement becomes the factor. And then you can like or dislike, but you cannot dismiss. And what I don't like about competitions is that if they dislike, they dismiss. But if somebody dislikes you in a concert, they don't dismiss you, they just leave. And those who like you want to hear your next concert or your next recording. And so that's why I'm saying the career of a musician is not only based on seductive strategy through a competition, is also beyond that. To be yourself through your career. And that means to be genuine to yourself. You can reject, evolve, change, and evolve, and that's fine. But to calculate it, it's not honest to try to do it in a calculated way. Either you are who you are and they like you as you are, or they don't. So every time you will play, you'll play a little bit more what you are told not to do. Progressively.
As I said, it really depends on a person's perspective of what competition is and how he, in his mental state, physical ability, to tune himself.
That's why I say at the end of our conversation, like in the beginning, when you met in Verbier, that somebody will come, a KaJeng will come to see you in 40 years from now, with the same quests, the same questions, even if differently personal, but the same quest of how to be myself in this world of competitive uniformization. Would it be through publishing editions, through recordings, clean playing? All that said, it still remains who you are. If not, the music by itself is paper or now screen. But you have to bring the factor of who you are.
Absolutely. That is,
and the best way to do it is to reject and the teacher and the editions. Because frankly, who cares what edition Rubinstein played Chopin on? Nobody. Probably was none of the editions today were so sacredly loving of Chopin because we think they are genuine. Probably they were not, because in those days we didn't have as much texting. So therefore, the self-involvement was obvious. And I still find that the signature at the bottom of an interpretation is your drive. And I thought that...
you mean to me personally?
Yeah, that jig was your signature. And in a way, you didn't play cautiously for a competition.
Oh, I don't.
You played like it was meaningful to you. And I thought they should say, we don't agree. Stylistically, it's too flamboyant. But let him play the final round and see how he would develop what he has to say. Because the whole point of a competition, by going further in it, is does the jury want to hear you play more? In other words, do you have something to tell them that they want to hear more of you? And that's often frustrating to me, is that people who might have more to say are not allowed to. And those people who perhaps have say less, they are allowed to. And so that is the unfairness to the system.
Well, I wouldn't think it's unfairness, it's the reality.
No, it's unfairness.
Why?
Because
it's the reality of how
when I
people
teach, I try to bring the best in each of my students. Whenever I go to a jury, I have to eliminate students. Well, not students, actually, the competitors. It's not my students that I mean. But and then we're told to talk to the students who are the competitors who didn't pass. And all of a sudden, we have to become advisors, when in fact we're just judges. And we judge you on 15 minutes or 30 minutes of this or that, out of the context. We don't know you, we just hear you. And so I find that being a judge and being a teacher is very different attitude. I prefer that. I think it's more useful for the long run. If I go to the place and I hear all the competitors, but in a masterclass setting, I think it's better.
Oh.
Nobody wins, everybody gets something, and everybody goes on. If not, 90% of the people are frustrated. If you win, they don't know why, they never ask. And those who didn't keep asking, what will I do to do better next time? So the competitions, in a way, shape or frame you, inevitably. You cannot ignore them. When you play next, you'll think of what you did last. And you'll hear me tell in your ear, just be yourself.
Well, I do have more to add to it.
It's not like a magnificent loser, nor an unfortunate winner. It's about being a long-run, developing musician. Because what will you do in 10, 20, 30 years from now in music?
We won't be competing.
You will be developing. Would it be students, repertoires, recordings, conducting, all shapes of music making? And people will adhere to you or they won't, because of what you present musically. And they want to know how you are. They want to know your point of view. So they don't want to hear you being objective. They want to be your subjective point of view. After all, even for our texts, they have editors. And those musicologists, the scholars, they decide where to place the P and the F and the MP and where to do that and this when there is not in the score. And they decide to put it in there and that. And students, in a way, follow the tracks. So somebody has to trust to believe that they know what they do stylistically. So you trust them for their scholarship. And in a way, when you listen to them in person, you can say, oh, I love Trifonov, I like this, I don't like this. It's your personal choice, but at least there is something to hear. And you need to not be afraid of being yourself.
I'm not, of course I'm not.
You certainly don't shy of being yourself.
One of my friends recently said about me, she's a singer, she said, you're always, to me, you're always unapologetically myself. I like that.
Yeah, so to some is arrogance.
Yeah.
To some is irony.
For me, it's self-assurance.
But the point is that you should erase even that to let just the music speak.
No, she's talking about my general personality, but of course related to my music.
But then you taint it by your personality, what you play. You see, we go always back to the same point.
Well, we are, yeah, as you said, we are inevitably we do, right?
But do you think you do it differently when you play in front of people or by yourself?
Let me see it. Wait a second. No. When in front of people, when I practice, I prepare the piece. I have my conception, and in front of people.
So you talk to yourself.
Of course.
And when you play to people?
I inspired. And inspired, and you be yourself.
And inspired means?
Well, I don't.
Heightened?
Heightened
is everything a little more? The piano is more piano, the allegro is more allegro?
No, that's not the purpose. The purpose is to present what I am assured of.
So you enhance it.
I don't know what is the word enhance.
Well, that's exactly what it is.
What enhance from what? From the practicing, of course. Because,
exactly.
But because practicing, you don't do your 100%.
Why?
No, because you are practicing. Practicing means
repeat.
No, it means sorting out the execution. Basically, that's what.
I mean, the orchestra's musicians still play at the rehearsal.
Yeah, but.
But I'm trying to say is that if the truth of the interpretation of the music itself is when you practice, because you don't have to seduce anybody but the music itself, then when you play in front of people, can you abstract the fact of the inspiration, excitement, whatever you want to call it?
If I do so, then it will be an inspired, a matter-of-fact performance. It wouldn't be a performance. Because I think music, a lot of them is meant to be played for people, even in a recording, as you said, for nobody and for everybody. So we need an audience and ear to have the bridges of communication.
So when you practice, it's your brain, and when you play for an audience, it's your inspiration, perhaps your soul.
Yeah, you can say that. And unless sometimes, and deep at night, I want to really listen to a piece, let the music speak to me, then yeah, I may give my whole inspiration.
So do you find in chamber music that you are more genuine because you don't have to sub-present, you just participate with the others?
But why is it more genuine to...
Because when you're by yourself, inevitably you have to dress it up in everything.
I think both is genuine.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think that with an audience I'm less genuine.
No, I think with an audience you're more enhanced yourself.
But it's still genuine.
Well, perhaps it is.
No, because it's like saying I love you to a girl. It's genuine.
The point is that if you practice it in front of a mirror to tell it to her, and when she's in front of you, you might be overwhelmed by the emotion of her beauty, perhaps. And then all of a sudden, you mistake the words and you say, "Love you, I."
No, that's the concept of to please, and I do not do that.
So seduce an audience is not to please.
I don't.
At least you have no stage fright.
You enhance yourself, but it is not necessarily equals to seduce. It's just to demonstrate. Or to tell.
Mr. Shebok used the seduce.
Oh, yeah?
And he used to say, if you seduce without love, it's a crime. Yeah. And so he thought musicians sometimes play seductive without meaning.
Yeah.
So the point of the story is that if you love, you don't have to seduce, you just are.
Yes.
And so if the piece it doesn't need you. If you don't need to show the people how much it means to you, then you don't need to show to the piece how much you love it. Therefore, there is a level, as you said, of matter of fact. But so, perhaps the real tone, the honesty tone that we were speaking about at the beginning that I mentioned, is probably that moment where you manage to be yourself and end up with the piece. Yeah. This kind of merging of the two worlds. So in a way,
it's what music is. For example, the Schubert B flat major is totally different from the rhetoric of Liszt Rigoletto. The Rigoletto is meant to seduce, I do think. Well, I think...
But it's meant to seduce Liszt himself.
Yeah,
as a performer.
But the rhetoric... It's also to seduce.
We don't know how he played his sonata.
Yes.
But we know he used this to seduce the audience through the beauty of a piece of somebody else.
Mm.
You see what I mean?
Mm.
So when he came up with the paraphrase, was in a way to seduce his audience.
Yes.
Whenever, when he played his own piece, nobody asked him if he has the right interpretation. So in a way, you take a piece to use for something. Like, that's why people reproached me the Mussorgsky concerto that you played. Is that it's too personal over the music of Mussorgsky.
Oh.
And so in an interpretation, if you're too personal, it can be also because you take too much freedom.
Yeah, I think some people they mystify other composers. Well, they were just humans not long ago, actually. I mean, the Mussorgsky Pictures is a great piece by him, but at the same time, it's his as also, and in a way, is also everybody's in a way. I think.
Yeah, it's universal as personal.
Yes.
But at the moment where you play, you appropriate it.
Yes.
And the thing
appropriate
is
a good word.
People tell you after you played it like it meant a lot to you. And at least they tell me that often. And I used to answer, isn't it the case for all of us? Why would we play it if it didn't mean to us? And so sometimes it's considered as a negative point of view when you overstate yourself in the piece.
Okay, but there's also another justification of why did I say that I do not have to be this ingenuine when I perform. It's because I think also while you're being genuine when you perform, you're also there to touch another person.
But with emotion.
Yeah, to touch.
Or
meaning
with affect.
No. Meaning, I hope my music is touching for them. That I hope they are touched. But I hope I don't.
But they are touched by the piece or by you?
No.
How you say the piece?
Wait a second. Quick second. By the piece, but by me telling the story of the piece, I hope the piece and my telling of it touches the listener.
And then they tell you tell it too much yourself.
That if I know I'm genuine, I don't care about it anymore. Because I think especially for young pianists, it's very tactful. Why do pianists become safe? Because they are unsure, so they listen to jury or the teachers, and they become I wouldn't say robots, but followers. Okay, but so this is the point: is whether you know you're genuine.
Because the teacher in the theater says, don't overplay your part.
But
so how do you know you don't underplay it?
Because also, I must say, me specifically, I don't always trust people's words. Because I don't even trust my own. We are all flawed in a perception. One person saying I'm too flamboyant or too artificial. Why? But I thought I was super deep and genuine. So who are you to tell me that I'm artificial?
But then why do you put yourself in front of them?
No, but this is...
In a competition, don't.
Let's say if they're just audience, but I'm talking in
but
general
if it's an
people.
Audience, it's not judgmental.
But they are all judgmental. But I'm saying that we have to be very clear, because if we are just be modest and listen to people's opinion, or like the Beethoven Third Concerto. I know I played terribly, not really spontaneous, and some guy, oh, it was really good, but you're so much more free. I'm not listening to him.
I think the answer to that very specific fact that you mentioned, I think, is that what we project is not what we are. And when Mademoiselle Boulanger said to me that very musical musicians can play non-musical, who's to say that to some people, the real musicianship in Beethoven's Third is when you're not spontaneous.
Okay.
And so you projected to them what they thought was better, and you thought that you didn't put enough of yourself. When you were more spontaneous, perhaps some of them thought that's too much.
Yeah. So
the projector is not the receiver.
Yes, but this is where I think, although I seem very arrogant, I actually have a very humble or modest self. He said, what I am is, while I'm being assured that I think that, let's say, I play deeply and genuinely, I can also open my ears to think, why would that person, jury or general audience, think that I am not? I think that is the openness from humility, that you also listen.
So you get hurt in your ego because you're accused of intentions that you didn't have.
I don't
like people say you didn't play simple when you thought you did.
No.
People say you played not enough involved.
No, that's exactly what I don't mean. Is that I'm not hurt. I am simply curious of what I am sure of my intention is, but why that person may think the opposite. because I do think, I do want my message or intention or whatever personality or intention, emotions to be perceived as I am.
Because I think there are many levels of expressing a certain mood, especially theater teachers. Let's say you go to a funeral. So you don't have to appear extremely sad. You can be grave, you can be deep, you can be respectful. Of course, if you're laughing and making fun of the grief, it's arrogance. And even if it's genuine in your projection, they'll think you're arrogant. And there are grounds for it. So the problem is, when it's andante ma non troppo, how much ma non troppo of it is, and why is it not quasi moderato? Because andante di più, moderato ma non troppo, it's very much close, right? It depends on which point of view. So I think you can have a margin where you can be convincing and where your intent is understood.
Exactly.
But at some point, your intent is misunderstood, which is what I meant about the self problem, because then you feel hurt. You say, I didn't intend to do that. Why do you tell me I was doing that? Because for me, this is the level of that or this. And I find that specifically to be so with the rubato, the unwritten factor. It's not in the publisher, it's not in their text, it's nowhere. It's just in between the sounds. And so the good taste, bad taste, how much, too much, tradition, everybody seems to, at least among the professionals, to own the meaning of it. But in fact, it's only for themselves. That's why I said, if everybody played their own piece, nobody would judge the other. Can you imagine if you only played your music from now on?
That would be great.
Because then you won't have to go through all that mayhem of, oh, it's too much, not enough,
You know what?
should be objective, subjective, involved, uninvolved, spontaneous, careful, cautious. I mean, forget it. You should just be what you are.
That is actually the case for pop music. That's why it's a different.
But it was the case for
appreciation.
classical music.
I know it was. I know.
Until basically 1900.
Therefore, the last bit of this conversation, I have a new theory: is that the purpose of classical music is different from what it was 100 years ago. 100 years ago, it was about evolvement. Today, we learned in an institution as a musical heritage.
So it's a reproduction.
Yes. And the value, therefore the value...
Conservatory, we conserve.
Yes, yes, actually, yes, conserving the cultural heritage of this musical, in a way, ancient art of the past.
And traditions.
Traditions. The purpose is totally different. And therefore the playing, why Cocteau play and today's play is totally different is because of that. It's because of the Ertzian, the authority of Beethoven, Chopin, and therefore in a way, that's why new pianists, they listen to they buy the scores and they appease to the older generation of jurists is exactly because of that. It's a totally different thing and honestly, in a way, we cannot avoid it. And therefore, also because of that, in recent years, I actually cherish new composers more and more. I think it's very needed. I think the demise of classical music is that if we don't produce original music, especially also by different nations and nationality, because of cultural heritage,
I understand, but I think the breaking point happened when the professionalization separated the musicianship. So the performer is not the composer, the musicologist is not the performer, the teacher is not the performer or the musicologist, because they need a publisher which has an edition with a scholar who says the truth over the teacher who involves themselves. So it's so many layers of everybody being in their niche. And if somebody decides that they just don't care and just play music like they love it, they'll appear uneducated, arrogant, or perhaps even to a certain extent ignorant.
So the true burden of classical music is all these
knowledge.
That's all this knowledge. In fact, it is. It's also blocking the audience from assessing it. Unfortunately, this is the truth. And, well...
Mademoiselle Boulanger started teaching when I was 7, and 9.5 almost years after, she told me at one of my last lessons, I think now you should forget everything I taught you. And that is another thing which at the time I couldn't understand, because I thought we become the accumulation of our knowledge. But in fact, she meant that, she told me, like politeness. You tell a child to be polite, and then when the child grows, he or she becomes naturally polite, in the sense that it's a respect, a civility. It's a way to react in society, not just by threat by a parent or a friend. And so it becomes a second nature. It's not by birth. And I think education is the same thing. We inject it into the intuition of the young musician, and then we should evaporate it and let only what the musician originally was. And whatever is left of it, the French say, la culture, c'est tout ce qui reste quand on a tout oublié. Culture is everything that's left once you forgot everything else. So it's like the essence.
Yes.
But it taints it by the culture. You cannot be uncultivated. And the problem very often is that by the time you accumulate all this administrated knowledge by given systems of teaching, schools and whatever, every way, you end up by wondering, why am I doing it in the first place? Because by the time I can play this piece, I forgot why I like to play it.
Oh, yeah.
And so the point is to find that full circle around where you can reach that truth, which I thought was the quality of merging your intuition with your knowledge. But for that, you have to be not insecure, not arrogant, but extremely humble to yourself, to self-search constantly, and then erase yourself while you play, to only play the music as it means to you, regardless if it's too much or not enough. And the problem is that you're right. When you are not judged on your intentions, or ill-judged on your intentions, then you are a little bit stifled next time you play. Even if it's not the same audience, you start thinking, I was told I not should do this, should do that. So in a way, you should be able to forget a lot of what you're told until it sort of blends with who you really are and find the genuine who you are. Rubinstein used to tell me after concerts, and Victor also, that he says, I play terribly now, but people think I'm very good. And in fact, they realize humbly if they can or can't anymore. And because of, in this case, they were so old. They realized that they couldn't play like they were young. Because it's a physical thing, nevertheless. Even if mentally they're very intense, like Horshovsky played for his 100th year. But of course, it's more about the mental intelligence and emotional intensity and the capacity to organize yourself even when you're physically very, very, very ruined. But nevertheless, they know that. And the sad part of it is that some of them were either acclaimed when they were not that good, either were missed by the general public and specialized audience. And you can say sometimes, wonder why this great pianist didn't have the name that he deserved when you look at some history of music, because you realize that perhaps Horshovsky was less famous than Horowitz, regardless if you like them and how you like them. But it happened. And so I think at the end of the path of the musician, which I wish for you to be as long as you need to develop all what you would like to bring to the people, is that through being yourself you will evolve anyway, but you should not be afraid of who you are.
Definitely.
That was very pleasant.
My pleasure.